Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. And if you are joining here in YouTube and you would like to uh, be part of the conversation, you got to join us in Zoom. You'll see a little link below. And if you're in Zoom and you want to join the conversation, you have to join Makana, which you'll see a little link below. So it's a little bit of a path to get there. If you'd like to be part of the panel, you can see we have a very large panel today. But if you'd like to be part of a panel like this, you just need to make sure that you have good internet, good video, good audio, and you have something to offer. And we know that a lot of you do. We see you guys lurking. You show up in some of the post meetings and pre meetings. We know that there's a lot of smart people out there that have not joined the panel. Try it. It's fun. Anyway, you can join us in the pre-show. It's 6 o'clock. We open the doors at 6 o'clock. If you want to just get a feel of what it's like, check your system, or just hang out for a little bit, even if you don't want to be on the main show. It's a lot of fun. We can't promise anything. Mostly it's tech, but today we were talking about farming and other things. So it just depends on where it goes in the morning. But we're pretty focused once we get to 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is the discussion, open discussion between 7 and 8. This week we'll probably run a little heavy on each day. If there's more questions, it just depends on how many questions we have. But between 7 and 8, it's general questions about media and virtual production. Second hour is generally something that's a little bit more vertical. Today we'll be talking about audio, and specifically we're going to talk about what we want to see next year in office hours. So if you have ideas, this is one time when we usually tell you don't put comments into Mukana, into the questions. We say keep the comments to the chat. But in this case, what we'd love to see is if you have ideas of things that you'd like us to discuss or think about for next year's second hours for audio, go ahead and put those comments into Mukana, and we'll discuss those in the second hour. If we see a lot of things tagged for the second hour, then we will stop the first hour on time. If there's only 2 or 3 things tagged in the second hour, then we'll keep going with questions. So that'll be really up to you. And really, this is a show that is all about, it's done by the audience, with the audience. The panel is part of the audience. This is truly a show that we all produce together, probably more so than any other show I've seen. So we really depend on you to ask those questions and also put those comments in. All right. I bet you we have a bunch of them right now. Bill, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Sure. Looks like our first question is in from panelist Andy Carluccio in Washington, D.C., who says, what are the panel's favorite home office purchases? Does not have to be tech specifically, just looking for those items that could make my new home office a bit more ergonomic or efficient as a space.
Chris is showing something there. What do you got there, Chris? Your shelves.
It's a piece of furniture from IKEA, ironically called the Alex. And it has just a bunch of very small drawers that's great for cables and adapters. They're very, I have a problem with drawers that are too deep because you lose things in the bottom. Right. Shallow drawers can be really useful.
Felipe and then Jason, and just keep going without me. I'm going to run and grab the one that I want to show you. Anyway.
Okay, for me, a teleprompter, so you can put your iPad or cheap monitor there in order for you to be able to look directly into the camera and see the other participants. And the other thing for me was the compass, the blue compass from Blue, the arm holding my microphone here. This was a terrific purchase for me, so super glad with that.
It is absolutely hard to go wrong with Ergotron mounts. Just about everything in this studio is mounted in some way, shape, or form. And I wouldn't have it any other way. It really has kind of saved my neck over the years. So that's my input. Let's see. I should go into the gallery view. You what?
I'll expand on the mounts because I bought one of these little components off Amazon, which is
do not get a cheap one.
Setup.
Yes,
no,
do not get a cheap
one. I got it pretty inexpensive though. It was under $100, and I bought 2 of them. And what I did was this: I took the pole and basically ran 2 of the double irons off each side. So now I have 4 monitors with 2 machines connected to 2 separate sets. So the 3 that run along the top are one machine, and the 3 that run through here are another. And I have all my desk space. So that's what I think was my best purchase this year.
That's great. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I have Ergotron myself. I worked with the company a couple of years ago at CES. So I got the mounts. This is my sit-stand table. I put it on wheels so I can move it around. But the thing that I got this year was the newer slider. my camera's across the room technically, so, and it's right in front of a TV, and so every time I want to watch something else, I can actually move the camera out of the way so I can see the monitors.
And what's the
just sitting
slider?
here.
What slider are you using?
That was the
Newer.
newer slider. Yeah, it was on Black
And
Friday.
I thought you meant a newer slider, but you meant a newer slider. NEWER.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not the iPhone remote, but the regular handheld remote.
That's great. Victor?
The Dante card for my X32. It's just been a life changer for me. I'm just in awe every time I use it.
Dante. Mine, I've talked about this before, but I think my favorite, like, just office thing that I have is that's not technical, not as technical, is the P-Touch Cube Plus. This is my little labeler.
Yes.
That I even labeled myself. Got my own name on it. So I feel like that's part of what you have. The first label you should always make for your labeler is your own name, and you put it on there to make sure that everyone knows it's your labeler. But get the Plus, don't get the regular one. It's cheaper, but you get a lot more labels options with the Plus. And anyway, it's so like when you get a wall wart, first thing you do is you pull this thing out and you put what it is. You know, like if you I was gonna pull one out. I keep wanting to show it to you, but like with the USB hub that I have, it just says USB hub, so I know what it was connected to. And then you'd be surprised at how much gear comes back after a show because you labeled it. You know, like no one wants to take they're not usually taking your gear. They just don't know whose it is. So you put an address on, a phone number. We've gotten thousands of dollars of gear that we thought we lost. Shows up in the mail randomly, usually not even return address. Like they just throw it in some bag, throw it in there and send it off on ground or whatever. It eventually shows up, but it's better than not getting it back.
Got to label both sides of the cord too, so that, you know, when you're plugging stuff in, you know which one is which.
Yeah. So anyway, so labeler is you can get a lot of other ones, but this one connects to your phone and your computer, and it's great. Go ahead, Hosmuk. Hosmuk, did you? Oh, you didn't have anything. Stuart, I misfired. Stuart, and then Peter.
My favorite purchase for making this sort of office area more fun, more ergonomic, or more comfortable for me is actually not in this room. It's actually in the kitchen, and it is a glass jar that keeps these things nice and fresh.
That's great. Very good. I have gotten obsessed with containers recently. I think my wife is. I'm just slowly taking over the thing. I got these OXO makes these containers that are different sizes with a little suction thing that you pop on the top, and it's slowly taking over my kitchen because I just keep on going. Oh, I need another one of those, and like one comes every couple of days while I slowly organize away from all the boxes and bags. Go ahead, TJ.
A quality chair if you're spending a lot of time at your computer sitting, and then depending on your arrangement, you may want to have a look into one of these. This, what I'm pointing to here, is a tray to hold my keyboard at the proper height for when I'm seated so that my elbows are at the correct position. So when I am typing, I'm not having to type up here or type in a weird position.
Yeah. Yep. Peter?
Yeah, let me cut over so you can see it. I invested in a good 19-inch rack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Racks are good.
And one that actually kind of fits the furniture as opposed to looks like it belongs in one of my data centers.
That's great. That's good. Go ahead, Jeff.
I got a laptop stand, which brings my laptop up here, so eye lines are better, and I can put my A10 Mini underneath that, and it raises it up, helps with the heat.
Great. Garrick?
Yeah, I keep buying a ton of these Belkin power strips. I just use them all over the place, and they're the 10 outlet power strips, and I mount them on walls and put battery chargers in them and mount them underneath desks and plug all kinds of stuff in.
Bill?
A lot of people have commented on the clocks that are up in the upper right corner of my office thing. And I did that because I had clients in two parts of the world that were not on my time zone. So having a glance at time zone check has been really useful for me.
Absolutely. And go ahead, Jeffrey.
The portal actually is I bought it for the Zoom ability to go 720, but I'm using it for a lot more than just that, which is crazy.
Courtney?
I just ordered a couple of these
yesterday, and they came in. These new portable monitors, I'm trying to figure out how to mount it so that our holder, maybe I'll 3D print something that'll hold.
Does that bottom part fold out, or is it just a?
No, it's just a little bit thicker, and it comes with this lovely case that is magnetic. If I knew how to stick it on.
How much is it, Courtney?
It's about $119, and it's full 1080p IPS display. Runs on 5 volts, which is interesting. So you can
Is it? And it's a USB monitor.
Yeah, well, it takes mini HDMI and or USB-C with DisplayPort capabilities, and then it uses USB-C for power, and it also has micro USB.
That's great.
Power too. So
who makes
the
that?
The ViewSonic version has a kickstand, by the way.
Well, this
And
serves
Courtney?
as a kickstand because the top flips over and forms a kickstand. There's a
company called Lindsay that makes a really big monitor holder like
Right.
this that I found works on most of those larger ones. It's metal and it's got a 1/4-20 on the bottom. It's turned out to be a good mount for me.
Does it have a 1/4-20 on the back? That's what I want to know.
Well, yes, it looks like it does. It's got an adjustable screw here, and there's a little hole there, and I think it's a 1/4-20, though I can't see it very closely.
Great. Put a link. I'll put a link to the monitor in the
They have a metal and also a plastic one that's less expensive, but I got the
Get the
metal.
metal. Get the metal. Good, Paul.
I find the NAN light is useful as a fill light today, but I also use it for just about everything else. I use it as a flashlight, and I impress my friends with all the cool things you can do with it, like the police siren and the lightning flickering and all.
Does
that.
it make a police siren?
No, I mean the police, not siren. The
I was pretty excited about that. I was like, wow, I didn't.
Police light does not have sound.
I have one right here. I was like, I'm going to turn that thing on right now.
I don't want to start a rumor. It doesn't do sound. Sorry.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say the AirPod Maxes because of the fast way that it can switch between Bluetooth sources, and then the noise cancellation is really cool with the one button push. So you could turn on the transparency mode. Oh, it's totally worth it. I mean, if you're using them so I'm using them to exercise, I'm using them to watch edits here on my machine, and when the kids are loud, I can just hit that noise cancellation and it tunes them out. So I'm using the heck out of them. So for me personally, it's been worth it. So really good purchase.
That's great. Tucker?
A solid network plan with a desktop switch for just like the random things you may throw up to test. So
yeah. Desktop switches are useful. Like just anything that you have there that you can just pop in. You always have to make sure that you only use half of them when you put it in. So however many you're using right now, just get twice that many slots so that you can pop stuff in, and you'll still run out within a year. Jason?
Yeah, I'll take that one step further. If you can get a 1U under the desk rack mount, and that's a great way to mount your Switch. As far as the Apple headphones are concerned, I decided to spend twice as much money and get Shure in-ear monitors, which arrived today.
Yay. GJ.
Peter, can we get a link to that particular rack mount you had?
Oh, I can't hear you, Peter.
Yeah, it was on Etsy, and I'll go grab the link and
handcrafted.
It absolutely is, and it's a nice, really nice piece of furniture.
How much is it?
I think it's like $300 for a 12U.
That's great. That's great.
Right, and it's stained. I mean, it like I say, it's a proper piece of furniture. It just happens to have, rack mounts.
Next question.
Moving on to Emily Russo, who's normally here on Education Day and one of our friends. And Emily asks, what would be the easiest way for a teacher to write on a post-production video they recorded? It's budget conscious and an easy learning curve like OBS, please. And device agnostic would be awesome.
So write on a post-production video so that you've recorded a video and you want to actually do a write-on over top of that video. Is this
in a Zoom, like she's playing back the video on a production system of some kind, or that's where it's kind of lacking information?
Yeah, what I'm not clear there, and maybe you can do that in the chat, Emily, is let us know whether you want to do this live or whether you want to do it in post-production and record it, because those are, now one of the things that you can do is there's annotation
here in Zoom. That's why I asked that. because she could annotate a screen share of a video,
right,
and use the annotation pen or the paintbrush.
She says post-production.
Yeah, but I mean, she's playing back
for
a
kids to
video
watch later. No, but
for
she's trying to watch it later.
classes.
So
Yeah.
cross-platform, I don't know. You know, there are on the Mac, there are a variety of drawing programs in the App Store that will float over top of your whatever's on your desktop, and you can actually have it float over top of QuickTime, and then you can either use a mouse or you can use a inexpensive Bamboo, like a little inexpensive Wacom tablet to do it. That's one possibility. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
A couple months ago, I was reviewing a product and I talked about it on office hours. It was a telescriber. I can't remember the exact term.
Telestrator.
Telestrator. Thank you. And it's Windows based, and you can bring in images, you can bring in videos, you can record it for later, you can live stream it. It used NDI to send it out. It used HDMI, of course, to also send it out to a switcher of some sort. I'm trying to find the name, and when I do, I'll put it into the Makana.
There is a tool, if it's a Windows-based system, if you have a Windows-based system, there's a tool that came with sysinternals, which was a Windows administration toolbox from back in the day. It's called zoomit.exe. You can look it up. It's an overlay application that's very small in size. It's only a few kilobytes in size. It runs text overlays, pen overlays, draw overlays. I could sample it right now, but I would have to turn it on the machine. I could bring it up later if somebody wants to see how it works. It's an Alt-1, Alt-2 sequence to put you into different modes. But if you search zoomit.exe under sysinternals for Windows, you can go see what that's all about.
Good. Tucker, you had your hand up? Or Guy?
Yeah, if you can record the output, even in Zoom of a iPad, here's just a movie that I quickly put in. And if I hit play from current, I should be able to play this video and write. I don't know if you can see that, probably poor choice in text. But the cool thing is you can either record that in Zoom, or you can, when you're done, let me exit the slideshow. It'll actually ask you to save it'll ask you if you want to save the notations. And this is in the annotations. This is in PowerPoint, not Keynote. Why am I not able to leave my, oh, there it goes. Now I can leave. And this is something that I didn't know that PowerPoint had. Ink annotations, want to keep your ink annotations, so then you can say keep. And now you have those for later. So kind of cool if you're doing a lot of PowerPoints. That's one way to go. But I'd probably, record the output, just the simple HDMI adapter out of, so they're like $50 out of an iPad, and then record that into Zoom or whatever you want to record on. Adamus Ninja.
Any other options? All right. Hopefully that helps. Next question.
Moving on, Cody Kirkwood of Dallas, Texas is in next with all y'all using the Raspberry Pis in production or at home use. If so, what are you doing with them?
Raspberry Pis. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I use it to run Companion because I find that Companion is most useful when it is completely disintermediated from all the computers in my studio.
Tucker?
I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a software stack for the Raspberry Pi that puts it into a mode that allows you to do playback, and it emulates a hyperdeck. So you can do all the automation and things. It's on my list of things to test. I will not use it in production for now, though.
Andy, and then Peter.
I do two things with it. I use it a lot in robotics projects. I'll throw an Arduino with it sometimes if needed for certain net communicating applications, or I'll just have it, I'll use the GPIO bus and have it control things directly. IFTT is another great platform that, for home automation stuff, that is, it's a great user interface for somebody who's just trying to get acclimated with it. It runs pretty well together.
Yeah. Peter?
Well, I'd go get it, except it's mounted on the wall, but I have a kit I bought several years ago. It's called a PiDP-8, which is it looks like somebody did a real great job of emulating or building out the front end of an old PDP-8 with all the lights and all the switches. And by the way, and the Raspberry Pi, which is why it's called a Pi DP-8, is running a PDP-8 emulator in the background. And so you can program it.
Can you tell people what a PDP-8 is?
It's one of the first mini computers from, I would say, late 70s, early 80s. So it's something I played with, when I was in university, along with giant IBM mainframes. So this is, right now you'd laugh at it if you saw what it. Yes, the Raspberry Pi, it's a Mod 3, but that thing is so much more overpowered than the original PDP-8. It's not even funny.
Was that something from DEC, the digital equipment company? Because they used to do a lot of that.
Yes, it is. It was the DEC.
Yeah.
It was the DEC.
Go ahead, Jason, and then we'll move on.
I'll give everyone a little bit more practical example of the PDP-8. If you've ever seen Security Now, it's the stuff behind Steve Gibson's head.
That's great. Next question.
Spike Rogers of Berlin, Germany comes in with rack-mounted Zoom capture systems with MacMinis or NUC MiniPCs. Suggestions on the best way to interact with the machine so I don't need a bazillion external monitors. Maybe remote desktop or an NDI output per machine of the main Zoom UI, allowing me to multi-view them on less monitors.
So, what we do is we have some PCs, although I'm now testing moving to Mac Minis, or at least adding Mac. I don't know if I'll add any more PCs. I think we've got 14 of them, and we're going to add the next test the early test with the Mac Minis look good. Now that the M1 is being supported, I think that I'm probably moving to those. But for most of our machines, we convert them to SDI immediately. so they come out of it as HDMI, they get converted to SDI and put into a router. Now we can multiply, put those wherever we need them. We get them, like now that whatever that display is, we're not looking at the display. We're not looping through things. We get it all into something, and I can put that thing on 3 different monitors or 1 monitor or whatever I need to, put it into multi-views, whatever we need to do with it. And so that's how we kind of handle it to keep it simple, as the machines don't have any of their own connections to the monitors. TJ and then Tucker.
I'm interpreting the question as how best to remote control the other computers. And I'm doing this daily. I'm using, I use a Mac to connect to a Windows machine, which then connects to another Windows machine. And so I'm using Microsoft's remote desktop to control 2 or 3 or 4, or even sometimes 5 computers deep through remote desktop. And it works fantastically.
Go ahead, Tucker, and then Jesse.
With Microsoft Remote Desktop, the one thing to remember there is that it kills your local display. So it kicks out the local instance, and you're now in remotely. So I would recommend against Remote Desktop for that reason specifically. I would honestly go with NDI and just use the KVM function. It's the most it can work anywhere. It's very straightforward. It gives you good frame rates and things like that. And you can scale them very nicely. Otherwise, something like VNC, things like that. But really, NDI is the way I would go.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I'm kind of designing a similar system right now with 2 mini PCs, and discovered that you need the Windows machine basically to do individual NDI screen grabs. So basically what I'm going to do is do the Zoom room on a Windows machine, and then use a Mac machine to be sort of like the streaming computer that grabs the NDI signals and makes a stream out of those.
Stuart?
Just on the multi-view side of things, it's pretty easy to set up any set of inputs, whether they're NDI, RTSP, or hardware-based, in vMix, and just send that as an NDI output that you can display anywhere in a single viewer, because the NDI viewers themselves will only allow you to select 1 or maybe 2 inputs, like a picture-in-picture, so you won't be able to do a true multi-view, but you can do it in OBS or vMix and then send it to a viewer.
That's great. Next question.
Brody Hafner is in next with what use cases would justify the cost of adding the NoiseAssist software plugin for MixPre II series of mic preamps?
So we buy a lot of NoiseAssist. And so the reason for us to buy the NoiseAssist, and I wouldn't normally, so the reason it was, I think the impression I have is the reason it was designed was to make it more intelligible when you're listening to it on set. Like if you have a field recorder and you're recording it, just make sure you can really hear it clearly. If there's, and just kind of clean it up. What we use it for is when I'm doing a live connection to a high profile individual with a MixPre, if we send that out to them, I'm getting a really nice clean output if I'm going to record remotely or I'm going to record. Now, if we record locally, we might record that NoiseAssist, but we generally record a raw version as well that we'll clean up later because we don't really want it to do that work. So I wouldn't think of the NoiseAssist ever as a recording. You might keep it for reference, but I wouldn't ever make it the only thing I recorded because it's doing a bunch of work that you can do in software. Like it's not, what's magical about it is doing it in hardware. And so anyway, but if you need to clean something up live, a live input on Zoom, that's what we use it for. It's a more robust version of what Zoom does when you do, noise reduction. Go ahead, TJ, and then Mickey.
Perfect example. My furnace fan just kicked on. I have NoiseAssist on right now at -6 dB. I'm going to turn it off. Right now, my NoiseAssist is at 0 dB. And I'm not sure what you can hear from the fans in the background. And now I'm going to turn it back up to -6 dB, which is where I normally run it.
Much lower. Still there, but much lower.
Yep, but that's, I don't want to push it too much more, but that is, I got fan noise like crazy. That's a great example usage.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like with what Alex said, if you have to clean up noise live, and you can't actually get rid of it, like physically in the space where you are, because ideally you do it that way, like actually get rid of it. Then, NoiseAssist works amazingly well for the price.
Jesse and then Jeff.
And the MixPre will also allow you to record the ISO as well as the post.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. Once you get into the advanced settings, you can be saving different versions of those things out, which is great.
And sounds better than the Zoom noise reduction. That's another reason to do it.
Yep, absolutely. Jeff?
So Alex, when you have the remote high-profile guest, are you able to remotely control the amount of NoiseAssist that's active, or do they have to follow your instructions and dial that in?
We dial it in when we send it out. I don't think we can control that in Wingman. Wingman is what we're using to control it remotely, and I don't think that Jesse, do you remember if I don't think we can control that.
No, we just set it at -3 and then call it a day.
Yeah, we're trying to tune it down a little bit. We're afraid of getting too aggressive. Like you get, that it TJ's sounds great, but if you start turning it up too high, you get into a situation where you can hear it breathing, and or some weird modulation issues. So, but yeah, so we leave it there. We can control start and stop records, but usually we try to send everything out pretty built in. It's kind of a generalized solution for that process. And the -3 has worked incredibly well. like I'm kind of amazed. Like when you listen to the two tracks, it's kind of amazing what it does. But again, what you'll do in post with it will be better than what it can, but just the fact that it can do it live. No, next question.
Moving on to Jeff Francis of Columbia, South Carolina, who asked, Zoom 5.4.7 has changed audio settings. In music and professional audio section, there's a checkbox that says echo cancellation. When this box is checked, is echo cancellation enabled or disabled?
Go ahead, Andy.
According to the SDK, if it follows the same as the vanilla client, checking that box will enable the feature.
And it's a big deal that with great power comes great responsibility. So know that if you turn that off, you have to be wearing headphones. Like it means that it's doing, there's all this work that Zoom's doing. And in general, you should always wear headphones in Zoom. You'll notice before the show, sometimes I'll leave it off because I'm taking my headset off all the time and putting it back on. But when we actually get into the show, I generally will have my headphone on because it allows full duplex talking. So because of echo cancellation. And so you always want to have a headphone in when you're, or some kind of earpiece in when you're in Zoom to have the best experience possible, because that echo cancellation gets in the way. That said, if you have an open speaker, you get the full experience of what happens, what it's doing. You'll get the power of what echo cancellation does because you'll hear yourself right back if someone on the other side isn't doing it. Go ahead, Jeff.
So they changed what this checkbox was called in this version. It used to, these 3 checkboxes: high fidelity music mode, stereo audio, and it used to be called disable echo cancellation. And the tooltip, when you hover over it, still says disables Zoom echo cancellation, but the button is called echo cancellation. So are you hearing echo from me right now as you speak?
When I talk, I can hear myself.
Okay. I have it unchecked, and I am now going to check it.
So now I'm going to talk, and I don't hear myself. So check with it on is when it gets rid of it.
With the box
I have
checked.
the version he's talking about because mine says disable echo cancellation.
Because you're in
still.
you're in something earlier than 547, right? 547 is when it. Yeah, so it's a little confusing. I will say that I'm super excited that Zoom is doing anything with audio. So it's the most. I still think it's the most refined control we have over audio of any online. The cooler one is. The one that's the coolest is Blue Jeans because it puts people into space. So like when people come in, it starts putting people into places in Blue Jeans so that you can kind of start pulling it out. But that's the only cool thing about Blue Jeans. Everything else stinks. Anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think the real warning here is they used to be able to tell people to go in there and turn on all the checkboxes.
Right.
Because that would give you the best quality audio with the least least touching of Zoom of that audio. But now if you check that box, you've turned on echo cancellation.
Yeah.
So they've changed the function of that box from disable to enable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jesse?
Yeah, doing a sound check with a musician yesterday, echo cancellation had to be off in order for it to sound full. It does, this weird cancellation thing. So musicians via Zoom, it's got to be off.
Yeah, you got to wear headphones. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I do not like headphones. And right now I'm using an echo canceling speakerphone. It's a BCC 950, which is also a webcam. And
right.
Are you going to call me to task for how it sounds?
Fine.
Am I getting any echo or not? How does it sound?
No, it sounds good. As long as you stay close to that mic, it won't matter. That if you can have like when we did when we had Elmo on last week, we had a full open speaker bleeding into the room, but we had an SM58, and the SM58 capsule and the capsule and that mic that you're using are the same.
Of course, I can't hear myself. That's the only disadvantage. When I've got the headphones on, I'm hearing what I sound like, but
I don't hear myself either. I don't mix myself in because I only use one ear. Victor?
What's really deceiving is that it says to enable all 3 of those options when original sound is on, and that clearly is not the case if you're playing music.
Yeah, so the update is a little confusing. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to point out. I still run into folks who use Zooms on a solo mode where they just go out and broadcast with it. You don't need headphones for that. Just for those who do get in there, and I see it all the time, people put their headphones on. They're worried that they have to have headphones on. If you're just broadcasting from Zoom, you don't need headphones. If you're having voice-to-voice communication with people, like Alex mentioned, in duplex mode, you need the headphones.
But if you're not talking to anybody, why would you use Zoom? Anyway, sorry, that's a whole other question.
I'm using Zoom right now. This is another Zoom session feeding into this Zoom session.
That's so confusing. All right, next
and we
question.
have no idea why there are audio problems.
Yeah, next question.
Andy Carluccio here in the panel from Washington, D.C. is using us as a little bit of a focus group, which is cool. What are the panel's favorite pieces of legacy equipment, even though they may no longer be practical in a current workflow? What lessons about these pieces of hardware or software could we carry forward when creating new products?
Jason and then TJ?
I'll answer the first one because I was reorganizing one of my analog racks. The Alesis, what is it, the 3036, basically taught me how to use a compressor. It's one of these staple rack mount things that's just absolutely beautiful and has more knobs than modern compressors, and it really helps me understand. Mickey's like, I don't know about that. It's just the one that I had and learned with.
Mm-hmm. TJ?
My beloved 2010 Mac Pros, the big cheese graters. They are fantastic. They're easy to work in when you need to open them up. the design of them is truly beautiful.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Sitting in the room behind me is a Lenovo laptop that has a Pentium 2 300 megahertz processor. It is positively ancient. It gets turned on a couple of times of the year just to be the extra backup for anything that I'm been writing and creating myself. So the part that matches what sort of thing to carry forward from that is make your hardware reliable. Make it so it works continuously and people will come back and buy more of your same. I now have, let's see, the Lenovo laptop I'm working on, the Lenovo laptop that does my internet stuff, and even another Lenovo laptop that was given to me in parts simply because I liked the first one and it was reliable.
See, and I was sure you were going to say the AJA Scion. I was like, oh.
Well, it's not really legacy.
They don't make it anymore. They don't support it. So I don't know. When does it become legacy? Is when it stops working? All right, Jeffrey and then Jason.
On the same line to what Stuart said, I do have a computer down in the basement with a CRT monitor because sometimes you need to go and open up a web page or open up an app and see how somebody else might look at it if they're looking through a CRT monitor.
There was a motion control, what's called the Cooper system, KUPER, I think, the Cooper system that ILM had for the motion control arm, and it was there forever. And I think the last time it went on sale, I think they auctioned it off, I think, in 2010. But the funny thing about it is that it still ran on floppy. So you would write out, you had to write out the positional data. There's a little software that you would use, and it would write out to a floppy. And there was always there was one floppy that had all these fingerprints all over it and everything else because everyone's like dirty hands. This is like ugly floppy. Then you put it in, then you load your data. But by then, everyone was doing the animation for the actual camera was all designed in Maya. So it was all done in Maya. And then it would come out in this little 1.44 floppy. And you'd push it into the thing, and the whole arm would go and do all the things that it needed to do. And it was an amazing thing. But it still runs. It's still like that. I don't know if they moved away from the floppy or not, but someone in Sonoma has it, and it's kind of an amazing piece of equipment. Jason, and then Bill, and then Jeff, and then Mickey.
That reminds me of the Bugatti car that runs on a specific compact laptop that it now costs thousands of dollars because nobody can find them. And it's the only way to tune this, several $1 million supercar.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Bill.
The major transformation of my entire life was stumbling into the Mac 128 when it first came out. That move from command line computing to iconic computing was enough attraction for me to get off of the fence, to start doing things with a machine on my desk. That plus an image writer literally was the beginning of changing my life. And the fact that Steve Jobs famously went to Xerox PARC and identified things that actually took friction out of using computers and myelinated that, worked so hard to make that work functionally and well that it literally changed the face of computing from that point on.
Jeff, and then Mickey.
I've got two. The first is a very practical production thing, which is analog security cameras and analog televisions. Because when you need absolute zero latency for conductor cameras or things like that, then analog television is unfortunately the way you go. The second, as a recording engineer, I love old recording technology. I'm not going to go downstairs and try and lift it up here, but we do have a working Victrola in the living room that's about to turn 100. And this Christmas, I got a old Edison cylinder. So those are all fun. Great lessons.
That's an old-timey record for those of you who have no idea what he's talking about.
That's great.
My mother-in-law had a grocery bag full of those things in her attic along with her Victrola, and it's sad to see. I will never see those again. There were several.
You can melt them and erase them and do them again. It's kind of cool.
Mickey?
That's really cool, Jeff. Yeah, for me, it probably would be the Shure FP32 and FP33. Like I learned on the location mixing on those, and I wonder if Marty might have one somewhere in his pile right behind
I
him.
actually do. It's not up there on the wall, but I do have an FP32 and an FP31.
Oh, that's great. Sky, and then Paul.
I have invested in the Avid DS, which was formerly Softimage. They were ahead of their time in the digital studio concept, and they did a suite of software all under one umbrella, and it's very similar to what we're using now, but it was 30 years ago. But they were just ahead of their time, and in a work path that in Media Composer, everybody was making a living doing the same thing every day.
Right.
And so they didn't really want to change much. But yeah, I invested deep and heavy into a higher end compositing system that could also do feature films. But then what happened was the manufacturer didn't understand the tool and or were making too much money on the lower end product. And so we were a small but mighty group, but I spent a lot of money that didn't see a lot of return.
Good. Paul, and then TJ, and then Courtney.
Yeah, I used to
Marty.
live in a little town in the Bay Area called Bolinas. You may have heard of that, Alex. It's you
Yeah,
can see
they
it
always
from
tear the
San
signs down
Francisco.
so that no one can find it. But now it doesn't work anymore because we have GPS.
So anyway, one day this guy, friend of mine, his name was Cliff Figallo. He was an editor on the Whole Earth Review. He said, "Come by Gate 5, Sausalito today. I got something I want to give you." So I went over there. We went back, and there was a room that had nothing but software, shelves and walls of software that people had sent in. And he gave me this program called AppleWorks for the Apple IIe. And so I had this Apple IIe tricked out system with the profile hard drive and the whole deal. So I put that in my Apple IIe, and that literally transformed that machine and transformed me and my way of working forever. I mean, I was so successful at having an integrated software system. I've never seen a piece of software that performed as well as that AppleWorks that Rupert Listener wrote on the Apple IIe.
We're going to start accelerating here so we can get through the other questions. TJ, and then Courtney, and then Marty. Then
To answer the second part of the question, what lessons can we learn? Design your hardware to be simple to use, simple to maintain, and last. And your software should be, again, simple and not bloated. Keep it thin, lightweight.
Yeah. Courtney?
I also have an age-old Edison phonograph right there behind me. But I was just going to mention this Hewlett-Packard tablet PC from about 6 or 7 years ago, which I use for playing out audio. I made a VESA mount in 3D printed a VESA mount and have it on a stand, and I keep that handy for doing audio play out.
That's great. That's great. Marty?
So for Mickey, this is an FP33 mixer. I was going to recommend this. This is a mixer that's used for ENG when everybody, the camera crew needs to be portable and battery operated. So this is a stereo model. It's very basic, but very, very, I had it upside down, very, very effective and easy to use, man. This is a very reliable piece of equipment.
Designed by Matt Anderson and John Tools from Sound Devices, by the way.
That's right. Yeah, Sound Devices is an offshoot of Shure.
And you can test the battery level by licking the batteries.
That's right.
Just think of it. You could do that with any battery if you just don't care about the repercussions.
Yeah.
It's a little difficult with a AA.
I think that I will say that, as I was thinking about, I have a couple of things that I think are classic that I have that, or they're still like the Sony F950, which was one of the cameras that was used on Star Wars Episode 2 and 3, where it was just, it's the first time you could do that, and an incredible piece of machinery. And I was thinking about, some of the things. I will say that, there's the Apple IIe, there's the 840 AV, which was just the right, sweet spot for Apple when it came out. It was just the perfect machine. The other thing what I was thinking about while we were going through it is I think Sound Devices makes more equipment that I consider classic than any other company I've ever worked with. So like the USB Pre II, to me, at one point I owned 60 of them, and they, they're just like these tanks, that just work, and this gets back into what kind of pointing towards what the question was, is that there's a lot of other USB interfaces that are cheaper and they've got more features, but this one has dip switches. When you send it out, there's not a lot that can go wrong. You just plug it in and it works. I mean, we've had one go bad out of 60 of them, and they've gone all over the world, inside, outside, everywhere else. The PIX 240 was like just this incredible workhorse for us. I just used it the other day at Elmo's because it was able to split the audio out from the HDMI and then send the SDI out, and it's a great little machine. 788. I mean, I think we did hundreds of shows on the 788 before I discovered a real mixer, like a full size mixer. Like we just had a 788. We just route all this stuff inside of it, and so they do a really good job, at just building stuff that you use, all the time. Anyway, next question.
Moving on to Maranatha Spanish Church of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
I missed the point that I wanted to say is they do more classic ones, and the point is that it's really hard to persuade them to add things. I've spent decades, a decade asking for things. It's really hard to get them to do it because they're thinking about how do you support it? How do you keep it simple? And how do you make sure that it's going to work when it comes out? So I respect why it happens, but it's always I'd like a couple more features. All right, next question.
Okay, Maranatha Spanish Church, Grand Rapids, Michigan. What would you recommend for a hardware audio splitter for 2 analog mixers? And he says Mackie CFX, but I think that's CFS, but I think it's Mackie CFX board.
Go ahead, Marty.
So the thing about audio splitters is the active component is a transformer, and the better the transformer, the better the sound, the more isolation. So you want to buy it from a reputable company. So the 2 that come to mind are Whirlwind and Radial Engineering. And typically the 2 transformers that you'll find are made most frequently by Jensen transformers. And a little bit more rare is a Lundahl transformer, is more esoteric. You can find solid state splitters. They're known as distribution amplifiers. And they may even be less expensive because transformers are kind of expensive to make. But transformers are going to be more reliable because there are no active electronic parts. It's all passive.
Nice, Alex.
Go ahead. I'm trying to get just keep going.
Okay, who held a hand up? Jeff Francis. Jeff, go ahead, and then Tucker.
So I'm going to assume by the fact that I assume they're trying to connect, because I remember seeing questions about this before. They have a CFX as their primary in-church mixing console for the congregation, and they're trying to add a second one to do a separate mix for their live stream. So assuming that this is their budget level that they're working with Mackie mixers, they probably are not going to be able to invest in a proper transformer isolated microphone split, because that's going to cost more than replacing the consoles. So what Mackie has is an insert point in the console, and that comes after the mic preamp. Let's see if that shows up. So in the Mackie manuals, they will show you how to connect these. In the first one that you see here, they talk about plugging the cable in part way, which I think is a really dangerous thing to do, but that will get you the signal out of the front of house mixer if you push it into the first click, and can go into the second mixer as an unbalanced feed, which if they're right next to each other with a 6-foot cable, you'll be okay running unbalanced. What I would actually recommend is you get a TRS plug on one end and a TS plug on the other end. So if you look at this TRS down at the bottom, and you need to wire the tip to the ring on the send console, that will, when you plug in that cable, the audio will still flow through the front of house console, and you'll get everything in the church, and it will feed over to the second console as an unbalanced signal, line level, all of those, because this comes after the mic preamp. So anything that's mic level, you adjust that all on the first console, but you will get independent mixing on the second console. So with some cables, you can connect these 2 consoles, and that's probably the cheapest way to go.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, that method that Jeff mentioned is a great way to cheaply get splits. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, you should expect a 3 dB drop in the signal going to the actual front of house mixer if you do that, correct?
You shouldn't get a drop through the front of house mixer, no.
Okay, interesting.
It should
even
be
though
okay
you have
with
a load on it.
Yeah, but it's a bridging load, so low output impedance to 2 high input impedances should be okay. Shouldn't get a drop there.
Interesting. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and
Chris?
make sure that of course that these 2 mixers are on the same power, so you don't have any grounding issues.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll say that I learned a lot about audio routing and just organizing audio for live audio from like the early Mackie manuals. They were great manuals. I love the way they were laid out. Also, there's a YouTube channel called Churchfront, and I tried to get this in yesterday, but we were too slammed for the Maranatha Church. Churchfront covers every manner of tech stuff that's necessary for modern churches. And if you're not familiar with it, you should. I think the guy's name is Ryan or something like that. I can't remember. But it's called Churchfront, and it's a great YouTube channel.
Go ahead, Tucker.
I was earlier going to second Jeff Francis. That is exactly what I would recommend. And also, if you're working through this kind of issue, reach out on Discord. I know there's a bunch of us that would happily jump on and just kind of talk through some of these things and some options you have, because there may be a combination of bus to bus as well as the direct out to get you the results you're after.
By the way, this is what I ran out to get was just to show you what this is. One of the it's a whirlwind splitter, and so this is 1 to 6. And we use these for all kinds of things. I mean, just getting a couple things out, but also comms. So we would use these, when we had analog comms, we'd run one cable out and then split it out from there. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I used to have a 56 channel whirlwind splitter. It was a little bigger than that one.
Yeah. These ones, this is like one of those things along with a decimator that usually went into most of our Crikey kits. You'd have 1 or 2 of these that would just be sitting in there along with some decimators, along with, other things, just because, we just need a couple more analog something or other, and it just fixes it, and so it's a good little box. And also a proper use of labels, if you can see it. I don't know if it's too overexposed, but you've got the return address and the, what whirlwind. This is numbers 2. And then even a little QR code for us to track it. So anyway, next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle and on the panel is up next. Thank you, Jason. Super Duper works great as a backup software. Will it work on Big Sur? Can I use it on more than one computer? And do I still need Apple's Time Machine?
Go ahead, Victor.
Developer has not yet released a version for Big Sur. I'm sure he's working on it. What does work on Big Sur now is Carbon Copy Cloner, which is an alternative to Super Duper.
And go ahead, Hosmuth.
Yeah, and you can use it on more than one computer. And as far as Time Machine is concerned, it's a different kind of backup. It's a versioning backup based on time. Rather than with Super Duper, you can do incremental backup or a complete backup. So it's a different requirement.
Jason and then Peter.
Someone may disagree with me about this, but my position keeps getting more and more definite on this specific point. Time Machine is not a backup. It is an advanced undo. And anybody who has ever tried to test Time Machine will immediately suffer the slings and arrows. It's just not the same thing.
I have to admit that it bit me pretty badly early on in the Time Machine, to the point where I'm almost angry every time it asks me, "Do you want to make this a Time Machine disk?" I'm like, "No, I don't. Ever, never."
I
That's
wish
what
I
goes through
could
my
turn
head
that off
every
permanently.
like every time I see
there
it,
is a
like,
way to do it.
No, I never want to do that. So that's how I feel about Time Machine. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I'm going to violently agree with Jason, except I like the fact that it's a super undo function, because in work, it has saved me many times.
Oh, yes. I use it. It's just not a backup.
Right. No, it's not. I mean, it's like people confusing backup with archive. Those are 2 different things as well.
Right.
That helped. That makes sense right there.
Yep. Next question.
Alex 4D in London says, for those of you that don't create motion graphics, but sometimes need to, what would you need from a motion graphics application for you to have a go at it?
Can you explain that more, Alex?
It's more that essentially there's After Effects, which is the kind of, it's the Pro Tools of motion graphics. And then there's Motion. And there's various reasons why people taking a look at both those apps and not maybe a bit daunted by them, wouldn't necessarily want to use them. What kind of thing would make people feel more comfortable in doing motion graphics every once in a while, or learning how to do it? In other words, have they got any ideas? Really, I'm just interested in in that, in how motion graphics apps could be designed so more people would use them.
Something I think that I don't know if it was you or somebody else pointed out to me that I didn't know is that Keynote will actually export with a alpha channel.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was kind of like when I found that out, I was like, "Why aren't people just using this for motion graphics?" It was like I was like, "Oh, I wish Keynote could just output these lower thirds," and someone was like, "Oh, they can," and I was like, "What?" And so it to me that's like the gateway drug, to motion graphics is Keynote. But anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Joseph Linashke actually does that. He does really nice stuff in some of his videos, and he does them all in Keynote. It's great.
We used to do all of our motion graphics for live was Keynote, and we would just use the Luma key. And so all of our stuff would all our lower thirds, all our graphics, everything else was all out of Keynote. This is a horrible way to work. I mean, for live, because you had to, but it worked and it was cheap. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Jeffrey, and then Doug, and then Bill.
I'd love an easy way to get graphics into an IP-based workflow, like even an NDI render engine that I could then import that as a stream into vMix or the like. And I reckon the people who are using the ATEM Mini Pro would love something very similar if that can be integrated.
Jeffrey?
I would say a program that's really simple, doesn't throw a whole bunch of stuff at you, and is also has the ability to cross over to another program to make it easy to get to the next level. That would be my suggestion.
I think that a program that could read motion files, like plugins, would be super useful for people that want to create them. So that, basically take what you're doing with motion, you build motion, you bring it into Final Cut. How about just bringing it into a standalone app that exports that out, so that people can sit there and make their little lower thirds or make their whatever, and they just have tons and tons of templates that they buy, or or it comes with it or whatever. But the bottom line is that a standalone application that read motion files, and
almost like a Swift
them.
playground, right?
Yeah, but you could update them so it would have the editable drop-ins and everything else for people who, then you could have a designer like you. I could get you to build something for me, and then, for someone who's not using Final Cut, who doesn't or wants to use it for live graphics or want to export it, but needs to edit all the names, or better yet, like have little tools like import, like the kind of tools that I'd want are like how to import a CBS file, so that it would, or CSV file or whatever, to pop, have it just export 50 lower thirds or whatever, out of it would be useful. Doug, and then Andy.
So as a self-taught motion person, I started with After Effects, and I can only speak to After Effects, but what really helped me to learn that project or learn that program, because that program is deep, is getting templates, and then kind of studying the templates and re-engineering of all right, how did they do that? And then YouTube has all kinds of tutorials. So if you're just starting out, YouTube and templates are a good way to go. And I live in After Effects now, and I think I'm pretty decent at it. But when I first opened it, I was scared of it.
I've said this before, but I find the best way to learn things is adrenaline. You just have to. You have no choice. You got a deadline. Andy.
I always look back to live theater workflows just because of the kind of people who go through that and what they have to do. And that's why I've really fallen in love with Isadora. Some folks really like Touch Designer. It's a node-based editing workflow. You can create animations and keyframes and things like that in it. And it's used mostly for projection design, right, in the world of live entertainment and theater. But I find myself using it pretty regularly in live stream work and when I need animated effects and things like that. It has NDI inputs, outputs. It has a whole suite of ingest and protocol send out. So it integrates well with workflows. It's easy to learn and pick up. I like it quite a bit.
And that's Isadora?
That's right. Yep. Isadora, Tricotronic.
Yep. Go ahead. Bill, and then Chris, and then Hosmuk.
So this is confession time. Some of my early clients, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when I was just getting into Final Cut pretty heavily, and I knew a little bit of motion, but not enough, and it was too much trouble to send things out to motion. So I started doing rudimentary motion graphics inside Final Cut, because the Final Cut graphics engine is a subset of motion, and as compressor is a subset of it. So and I actually got decent at making simplified motion graphics, even in an interface that wasn't designed for it. So sometimes don't think you have to go to the big tools if you're doing something simple. It can be built into the little tools.
Hosmuk?
I have 4 creative people and a new manager that's coming. And the new manager is a deep Final Cut and motion user. All the others are addicted to Adobe Suite, so they use After Effects, and my manager then has a competition with them how quickly he can do a project compared to
I was just about to say, anytime someone says that, I go, how about let's go head to head on that one.
And every time he's way ahead of all the other 4, so now there's a slow conversion to motion, and it has had a huge effect on the customer base, where our turnaround time has just exponentially increased.
Yeah, no, that's a common thing. Anytime someone says that they're still using, their After Effects, someone else is in their motion, I'm always like, so which department is faster? Like I always ask, because you just always know what the answer is. Go ahead, Sky.
As a After Effects user, I know getting an alpha channel out of After Effects is like a 3-step process. So I'm curious about this Keynote. Getting an alpha channel out of Keynote, is it hidden like After Effects?
Transparent background. You just have to set it to transparent background. Go ahead, Alex, and then Leland.
So you set the background of your all your slides to be nothing, in other words, no graphics, and you can set it to be a color, but you can actually set that color to be just transparent, and then you export as ProRes 444.
Brilliant. That was the next question, because animation out of After Effects seemed like the solid way to get transparency out.
Yeah.
My only question was, is motion as proprietary as After Effects is? Because I'm not familiar with motion at all. I've played with
Mac
After
only.
Effects to a limit. That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's Apple. So, but it's $50. It's like the best $50 ever spent ever. $50 once, no upgrade costs, no nothing. Like it's just amazing. And by the way, if you're working in HDR, you just export things as PQ, and After Effects, you get to do 3 somersaults, and it might work. Chris,
there are some reasons for using After Effects, but for most people, it's not necessary, and it's also very expensive. The other thing about a lot of I want the simple motion thing is that when it comes to learning motion graphics, I think a lot of people, they get distracted by like jangly keys and squirrels, and they don't stick to the basics. And I think a lot of people just get really distracted trying to do too much too soon, too early, and it just, I mean,
the best thing, the best way I learned to do motion, I did a lot of motion graphics early on for a bunch of different cable networks and everything else. But how I got into it was I would take their motion graphics and I would just rebuild them from scratch. That's how I learned how to do motion graphics. Was I just took their lower thirds, their opens, their sweepers, and I would just figure out how to build them in Electric Image and After Effects and Form Z, and I would just build them all until mine looked exactly the same. And by the time I was done with about 5 or 6 of them, I could hold my own. Because if you really push hard, and because those designers, they spend a lot of time, they spent a lot of money making that look good, and so you don't have to go through figure out how to design a good one. You just reproduce it, except for CNN. Those guys, they stretch their fonts. CNN stretches the fonts. And sorry, every time I see CNN, I can only watch CNN for so long because I keep on looking at it going, they're stretching the font on the lower third. It makes me so upset. Bill.
One of the things after working with art directors, and really good ones for a while, is the biggest lesson I learned from that is that they keep simplifying. They keep simplifying. It's not, I want to fly this thing around until it lands over there. It's that I want to accelerate smoothly, move it over to there, and then have the type show up over here next to it so it's eminently readable. And that simple move done well is far more effective than flying boxes everywhere. So it's always getting it right.
And there's the one thing I would say about graphics is the importance, and Alex talked about this a lot when he was showing some of the stuff he did a couple months ago on a Saturday, is you move it because it means something. You move it to pull the eye to that for that moment. You do it for a reason, not just because it looks cool. But most corporate, they just want, I want an animated lower graphic, blah, 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 and then this is all coming, and then it just becomes sensory overload. It actually taxes the viewer when you have a whole bunch of things moving, where you can just have it, just a little something that's going to pull your eye over there for a second because we want you to look at something, and then let you go and not have it be. And that's the problem, I think, it's one of the reasons I don't like Facebook. I mean, streaming to Facebook, because I hate the bubbles make me crazy, like make me really uncomfortable. So I don't like watching it. Courtney?
No one's mentioned it yet, but what about Fusion? That's part of Resolve. Is it part of Resolve, or is that a separate program from Blackmagic?
I want to play with motion graphics in Fusion because a friend of mine, Barry Munster Tiger, was doing a bunch of the examples. I think he was demoing stuff at NAB a couple years ago, and he really walked me through graphics that I think he had built a bunch of templates and examples, and it looks really powerful, and I'm really interested in it. And I just haven't turned the corner. So it's been one of those things, and I still looked at it, I have to admit, as a primarily a motion artist, I still looked at it going, still probably 4 times slower than motion to build something. So I kind of was like, maybe I need it for something, but I couldn't figure out what at the time. Sky?
Well, again, that suite of tools is what Blackmagic ended up doing. Is they started out with a color correction software, then they added an editor. Now they've added this. They've also added a good. They go out and buy a known commodity as in their audio software, this compositing software, and now they're putting it all under an umbrella.
Specifically, they buy companies that have really good technology and bad business models, and then they put them into it. Like that's. I don't think they spend a lot on those companies.
No, but they are good products, but they are a different way of working.
I mean, you look at any of those. Fusion is a great product. Fairlight,
Exactly.
all the ATEM. They were all great products for what they were. They just couldn't figure out how to turn the money.
And now they're working at trying to figure out how to the best handoff. Yeah, slowly, but consistently. That's the big difference. Is unlike other software that just change the name of the software every year versus actually doing something.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Justin Emanuel of Staten Island, New York is here with, for those with Big Sur on Intel Macs, any good or bad experiences using Waves or Isotope plugins in Logic and in Final Cut?
Anybody have any up or down issues? Go ahead, Victor.
Like any other plugin, you have to be careful, and it all really depends. So for sure, the Isotope stuff, you need to check if it's compatible with your operating system because they are often behind. And the Wave stuff, you need to make sure that you know what you're getting into when you start buying plugins from them. They're going to hit you up for a license fee every year, so it comes with some catches.
Yep. Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, both of these companies, Waves and Isotope, have announced they've sent out emails saying that they're compatible with Big Sur on Intel only, not M1.
Mm-hmm. Next question
is coming from Shane Foley of Ashland, Oregon. On Saturday, John Puett mentioned using audio hijack for noise reduction on his main mic. John's not on the panel today, but for those of you using a noise gate in an audio hijack chain, would you mind sharing what plugin you're using for this? And he says thanks.
Is anyone doing that today? Go ahead, Tucker.
I'm not doing it today, but Waves has a program called I think it's PSE, Primary Source Expander. That's a pretty unobtrusive way to do that, and it's not a gate; it's an expander, so it does drop the level a little bit when you're not talking, and it brings it up. But it does a really good job of figuring out what's the primary source. So
good. Next question.
It comes from TJ on the panel. CES is coming up real quick. How should those of us not of the press be watching these events unfold so that we can see the new toys we probably can't afford to buy?
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, that's hilarious. Right as that question comes in, I just get like my 50th email, inviting me to Showstoppers, which for those who don't know, like virtual Showstoppers is like the craziest idea I can think of.
Have you been to one yet? I heard it's good.
Oh yeah. No, I've been to several.
I haven't been to any of the virtual ones. Yeah. I'm going to hopefully go to,
Yeah, let me talk to those guys about it. I wonder if they'd be okay for us to. What we should do is jump into theirs and then stream it back to us.
Yes. They do
Hmm.
have good food, though. That's like the part I'm going to miss.
Yeah, they
can send it
us.
out.
Yeah, exactly, Stuart.
Simple way. Subscribe to Blackmagic's YouTube channel. You'll get most of what we want to see anyway.
Exactly. It's not for those of you who haven't been to NAB. The funny NAB. I mean, CES is a little different, but NAB. There's this like 2.5 hour press only thing that happens on the first day of NAB's. The first day of the thing, and it's usually very, very long. It used to be packed with like 40 different releases that they're putting out, and now it's like 3 things and probably do it in a half an hour, but we spend 2.5 hours walking through it because you know that there's going to be a couple things that are worth sitting through all of that presentation for. Go ahead, Chris.
From what I understand, there's some companies are actually producing their own CES videos that will be streaming.
Yeah. So
you may look around.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably try to figure out a little guide for someone to like what you want to look at. But I think that depending on the different events, what we ought to look at is for the publicly available ones, we should look at probably a higher rate of view-alongs that we do on the keynotes that make sense. But I do think that I'll be really interested to look at what Showstoppers does, and whether it's effective or not, because I think it would be really fun I don't think CES is the right platform for us, but I think for NAB, it'd be really fun if we built something up within office hours that, different vendors could come on those couple weeks when they're releasing things, to show us. Like we might really focus it, and we're going to do that more of that anyway in those second hours, is having more products that we're showing, like we did with Zoom OSC or with the Elemental Link or with other things like that, of having these kind of verticals where people are coming to show us things where we can ask questions and give us kind of a unique, but I think that there could be a thing where we, during NAB, extend it 2 or 3 hours. So we spend an hour with this company, an hour with that company, an hour with that company, and we kind of plow into it. So people who want, you guys could schedule it all and we would jump into different things over, kind of like we do on Saturdays, but imagine that for a week or over a couple of weeks where there's like 2 or 3 hours of second hours that are looking at new products and being able to ask questions. But we would require them to up their game. If they show up with a webcam and a speakerphone, we'll probably kick them out.
It'll turn into a ruthless review instead of whatever they were trying to show us.
Exactly. Courtney?
Is Showstoppers virtual version a paid event, or is that free, open to all?
It's paid for by the vendors. So, the way Showstoppers worked in general is that it was a little bit of a lift to get in. You have to, you have to be press or bloggers, or you have to send them a link, and you have to do some of those things. And then there's about 150 vendors, and 100 to 150 vendors. They all have like a 6-foot table. Some of them got a couple, would buy a couple. It's like, and I believe it was like $10,000 a table, something like that they do. But they buy us. It's a lot of good food and mixed drinks and all kinds of other stuff, and we all get to see each other. So we'd all a lot of us, that's the only time we see each other is at Showstoppers and CES Unveiled and other ones, and we'd all go. But if you were a press person, the biggest pain with all of these events at the LVCC is you have to deal with all the civilians. When you're trying to shoot and people are just walking between your camera and there's all these people and you have to walk a long way to get to the things you want to cover. And so you're always like, oh, I hate all this stuff. And Showstopper started, I don't know, a decade ago or 15 years ago, where they just figured out that we didn't want any of those things. And they kind of sideswiped the companies for a while. And now, CES created their own CES Unveiled, which was designed for them to outdo Showstoppers. But then we just go to all of them, and it becomes the only thing in press that you care about is going to, in CES is one every night. Then you just go to each one each night, and you get to see some of the vendors twice, but you see a lot of new ones. And it's really where all the press comes from. All the press at CES comes from Showstoppers and CES Unveiled and a couple other ones. It doesn't really come from the floor anymore.
But if you're not a member of the press or
can't get in,
can you get into the virtual version? That's my question.
I don't know. I think that you really have to. They want to see bylines somewhere, They want to see you like writing stuff and regularly. I mean, I use Twit. I'm on a show. So, but you have to use something. They definitely check it. Because I got turned down a couple times in the early days.
Office hours as a...
We should probably. I could talk to them about it. But again, I think that what I'm going to talk to them about is at least to get started is to do the virtual one where we bounce around, but have us feed it back into all of us. And so suddenly it's like bringing 150 people to each booth. It would be kind of useful. Go ahead, Leland. I'll talk to them.
I just wanted to mention, kind of on the same track, as I was searching the web the other day, I came across a nice source from Pro Audio, which is a list of a lot of the Pro Audio sound webinars that are going on. So this is sound related, of course, but keep in mind CES and NAB are obviously sales points for a lot of these vendors and manufacturers, but those same manufacturers and vendors are out producing content as webinars and training sessions for people to learn in this COVID environment that we're in. So don't forget to go right to the source and just find out what they're doing behind the scenes outside of these normal gathering events.
I think the unfortunate thing is most of them are underinvesting. So when they would have spent $500,000 or $1 million on a booth, what they're not doing is spending $50,000 on a studio. Like taking some of that event money that they had already earmarked and put it into single one-time costs of $50,000 or $100,000 or $150,000 in a studio where they're going to properly interact with their users and their potential buyers and so on and so forth. I feel like there are some companies that are doing that, but a lot of companies haven't. And maybe they just don't know better, but I just feel like there's a huge opportunity to create a better experience online than they ever could create in person. Tucker?
Disregard background noise.
Okay. Bill?
Well, one of the things about the press pass and that whole deal was embargoes. So the press understands that if there's an embargo on the release of a product information until 9 a.m. on Monday of NAB, nobody in the press will talk about it because you risk getting your press credentials pulled for the next year. So if you opened it up, as Courtney suggested, and had the regular folks attend these, there would be a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, usually what they show at CES Unveiled or whatever, they assume that because a lot of us were streaming live from it. So I don't think embargoes weren't as big of a deal, but we got to the point where, the best part at my height, I always had 3 tags. I had an exhibitor tag because I was working with some exhibitor. I had a press pass and I had a speaker pass. So between that, you can pretty much go anywhere at any point in time. You can walk in off hours.
All the ribbons, all the ribbons, all the way down.
You have to have different ones, or they'll go, oh, you can't do that. But you have 3 different ones, and you stack them up, and then that's the I go anywhere, anytime. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah. I love the earlier on, and you still do it whenever you bring people in to show some of their stuff in this environment. I love the way that works. And I think that I wish that more manufacturers would see how that happens, because I've gone to several different manufacturer webinars, and it's a sales guy doing a very kind of mundane thing that it's his pitch when he has no feedback, and sales guys live on feedback. And so getting them in here where they get feedback and they get
the bottom line is
so cool.
when we tell people, we just say, don't bring a salesperson. We just say or you can have a salesperson come, but you really need to bring the engineers. Like you need, like our team, this group is an engineering group, like you can't survive. A salesperson can't survive what we do. Go ahead. That's why we call it the pit. Anyway, Chris.
We had the same problem on the Computer Chronicles show that I directed in the 90s and early 2000s. And when people would send a salesperson to sit and talk with the host, it was just, I'd just call cut, and I'd walk out on the set and I'd say, look, you can't do this. Our audience wants to hear you talk, not preach. Right. I said, imagine you're sitting here with Stuart, the host, and you both have a long neck and you're standing in the garage talking about work. That's the way you pitch in this show.
Yeah, and what I try to set people up for when they come here is that you're going to talk for 10 minutes. We're just warming the audience up by talking for 10 minutes and setting the pace and getting it ready to go, and then it's all going to be a conversation. It's not, so
and then we turn up the heat.
Yeah, then we go, whoop, well, let's turn this up. Go ahead, Stuart.
I just need to know if Chris was just making a reference to a beer bottle that's available in Australia when he said a long neck.
Yeah. I don't drink, but I
I
understand the concept.
Yeah. Next question.
Moving on to Michael Fisk of Spokane, Washington, Spokane Valley. I'm considering trying a video editing program called Movie Mater. It's very affordable and designed, I suspect, more for the amateur or hobbyist than commercial use. Has anybody tried or used it?
I do not know what that is.
That
Go
may be
ahead,
a
Stuart.
typo. Maybe it means movie maker.
Yeah, I had a quick look at the website, and it's pretty much the identical sort of layout as all of those DVD authoring editors that used to ship with a DVD burner. But looks like it's been updated a little bit. It's very simple interface by the looks of it. If the price is a reflection of quality tech support, which they seem to offer, it's probably worth that amount of money.
There you go. Next question.
Moving on to Talak Miguel Lopez Waterman of Queens, New York. A question for Andy Carlucci. As a developer, how is it developing for Big Sur and the M1? Lots of retooling? Question mark. We have heard lots of reviews, but not much from those who need to program for it.
It's an interesting one. I'd say that the actual code migration you have to do to work with M1 is not the chief problem. It's the dependencies that you have to wait to get updated. So across all of liminal stuff right now, we're dealing with this. So Zoom OSC, I need the Zoom SDK to be updated to support the M1. Right now we have purple video when you try to join a call. So I can't do anything as a developer about that until the dependency is upgraded. On the Streamweaver side, our UI rendering has a dependency on a framework that hasn't been updated for the M1. So my hands are tied across, the different things that we do until those frameworks are developed. And that's been the main challenge. Actually doing the things that we do uniquely ourselves to make them M1 compatible, that's actually not that bad. This Rosetta 2 stuff and all of the migration, Apple's put a lot of thought into this migration process. It's just we have to wait on a lot of this, dependencies that were made by, some Russian in 2000 and hasn't been touched since. That's what we're dealing with.
Right. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it's the pre-work that will absolutely kill you. There is nothing more frustrating than compiling it, painstakingly looking at the spec and it just fails and it fails and it fails and it fails and it fails. And at that point, I give up for a month and then I come back to it.
Right. Next question.
Panelist Stuart Fairweather of Melbourne, Australia says the new layout for IMDb appears to be another focused on the cult of personality, with the details film nerds love hidden even more and performers front and center. What are the panel's thoughts on the new look?
Go ahead, Jason.
They know where their bread is buttered. Their money comes from people who pay them to basically make IMDb, instead of a fan-based thing, which is what it used to be, it is now basically LinkedIn for Hollywood, and so that's why.
Go ahead, Jason, Jeff.
And the primary use case is you're watching something and you're like, where have I seen that guy before? And, that's what it's for. At least that's where it gets used for very much.
And I haven't been on it recently on IMDb Pro, but did they change that interface much? IMDb Pro's interface? I haven't been on it for years. I just haven't needed to, but I used to be on it every day. Go ahead. Go, Stuart.
The front page changed quite some time ago, but they're now changing the listings for all of the movies,
and that's in Pro,
all of the actors and what have you. This is on the main website, not on the Pro version.
Oh, the Pro one is the Pro one is the geeky one. And I haven't needed it. We used to track a lot of stuff, so I was on IMDb Pro, and it usually had a completely different interface. For what the IMDb and then IMDb Pro generally was a completely different, and there's a whole different set of tools and tracking than what you'd have. So I never considered IMDb.com a real website, I have to admit. Once you're used to Pro, you would just go to Pro and it has all that. You're paying a subscription for it, and that's when you get all the real data.
It's always been nice for people, if they just want a quick reference as to who you are as a cinematographer or as an audio person. There was lists that everybody could access to just check. And it's this person must be a professional. They've worked on all of these projects.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Mickey?
Yeah, although that specific use case that Stuart just mentioned is popular amongst us, I think that's not the bread and butter of IMDb, because remember, they're owned by Amazon and they want to push content, basically. So they have other priorities aside from ensuring that cinematographers or sound engineers or whoever know who worked on what.
I am amazed that given the traffic that IMDb gets, this is kind of one of those things like I can't believe they don't leverage that into like real content, like behind the scenes or discussions or other things like that. You know, they have such a huge base. They could turn something on like that overnight. And I'm always amazed they don't. But Amazon,
that's kind of what they're doing now. They're doing an IMDb on the scene, and they're starting to do some of their own content on the front page. It looks like.
So far, what I've seen has been pretty light fare, and I feel like they could really easily dig in if they wanted to, and make it something that was pretty deep, pretty fast, and probably launch it faster than anyone else. But I often find Amazon to be perplexing in that case. They have all the pieces and then they just don't put them all together. So anyway, next question.
It comes from our own Victor Cayo of Brookings, South Dakota, and he has a question about comms. Can you explain how comms are integrated into a front of house mixer so they can hear both the comms and the mix?
Go ahead, Marty.
That used to drive me crazy when doing an on-location broadcast show. Having a pair of headphones so I can hear program, and then another pair of headphones so I can hear my director and comms. And then I found a product called the Model 72 from Studio Technologies. This is a little box that where you can plug comms into one end and audio comes out of the other. And you put that into your board as a line level input and arrange a bus so that you can hear both your program and this device, and you can hear comms. You still have to find a microphone that you need to interface into the system, but that enables you to hear your comms through your mixing console.
And you know, I don't know exactly a person to ask if you see Brian Maddox pop on. He has a really nice setup online that he's built that he brings along with him, and it's a mixture of Studio Tech stuff as well as he's got one of the Studio Tech, I think, announcer boxes that he can kind of talk into, and then he's got this nice little headset, and he's got earphones, and he's got it panned in different. He's got the comms and the show and panned in different places, and he's probably got the most advanced on set or on location setup I've ever seen in person. And it's like a couple little set of boxes that he comes in, he just shows up with it, and he's been refining it for years, working with us. And so at least when he's working with us, we see it constantly evolving. But he's probably someone to ping off site. And also, if we see him on here, we'll bring up the question because I think it'd be fun to have him talk through it. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think every front of house mixer has their own way of preference of doing things. Some are okay keeping like a one ear cup headset on. Some have like a near field set of speakers that are that they use for if they want to solo something, and also that's where they route their comms to. So it's a whole lot of personal preference.
Go ahead, Doug, and then Tucker.
Yeah, in our production truck, our A1 has 2 woolers, and so he routes whatever audio he wants to each wooler. So he doesn't wear headphones. He has 2 monitors that he's listening to the show, and then he can adjust the woolers as needed, just to hear the direction. So.
Tucker's probably going to say what I'm going to say next, but I'm going to let him say it.
There's a couple of different ways, depending on. There's some software only ways. I tried to find the name of it, but there's a company that in hardware makes just it's a guy that solders up a bunch of really cool connectors and dries out intercom lines so you can plug them straight into to consoles, a whole bunch of different interfaces. But I'll try and find the name of it.
Is that the guy? Is that the guy down in Texas?
I think so.
Yeah, the guy in Texas that just does all the custom cables.
Yeah,
like anytime you need that, it does like the guy.
Yeah,
everybody.
I could go solder it up, or I could call him, and I'm just gonna call him.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then with Unity, since I use Unity a ton, is Felipe still here? I don't see him. Worked with Felipe on setting him up a system with audio hijack, and basically it puts Unity in one ear and then program in both ears. using Unity with audio hijack's ability to grab audio and things like that. So there's ways to do it in software only with Unity, and then there's ways to do it hardware.
Yeah, the Studio Technologies hardware, like if you don't have an external comm system and you don't get too big, because I will say the Studio Tech Dante solution is doesn't scale well. But if you have like a small crew of 4 or 5 people, and you want to put a couple channels on comms, you can tie that into a mixer, and so the whole thing kind of lives inside of that. So you still have your belt pack, you still have, you can have comms, you can tie it into Unity, you can even use, we can tie it into using Dante, tie it into ClearComm, you can tie it into a lot of different things. And it's all Dante based, it's just Ethernet to everything, to little. And it's like, I want to say it's is it the 374B or something like that? Go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, I think that is the model. I would say people that are considering doing that and using an audio console, Doug, we worked through this for the past 6 months, but you'll quickly eat up all your audio buses on your audio console. I would recommend getting something like a BSS processor. It kind of opens you up to more IO in Dante and better matrixing capabilities than the Studio Tech specific box for it.
Interesting. So it's what's the BSS? I'm not familiar with that.
There's a bunch of different audio processors that have Dante abilities. I've programmed BSS Blue systems for a long time, and it's the old SoundWeb London stuff. And it's basically it's either 32 or 64 by 64, and you literally can build any processing you want in it. You can do analog I/O. You can if I had Studio Tech boxes personally, that's exactly what I would use, because I can have analog outs, digital outs, phone connections. You can do a ton with it, but it's a programmed solution.
Yep.
Yeah, we just got the Symmetrix Radius, which is exactly the same box, just a different name of what Tucker just said, and we implemented it this weekend, and it was great.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Symmetrix, so it's the same box or similar.
I don't think it's the same box, but it's the same mindset behind it.
Yeah,
it is an open source platform that you can program inside of. The thing is, if you use your audio console, you are absolutely hog tying your audio engineer, and he's got to understand a lot of busing at that point. So
go ahead. Next question.
Okay, the next question comes from Mark Harder in Brooklyn. Leland, what is creating your corner clock? Sorry if this was already explained.
No, not a problem at all. This is actually being done through vMix, and the way that is performed is this way. Basically, you have to go to the settings. If you're not familiar with it, there's a production clock that is built into vMix. So once you hit the settings tab, you'll want to go to the options and make sure that you have the checkbox set for production clocks. And once you do, that production clock will show up here in between the program and the preview. If you double click that, you can change whether it's a clock, an event countdown, a recording countdown, or a streaming timer, so that you know how long you've been recording or streaming. And once you set the times, whether AM or PM, and the hour offsets, and how much accuracy you want on that, you can create an input from this dialog box that will, I already have one on my system, so it's not going to create a second one, but it just creates an input here that can be scaled to any size. So I happen to position this one down into the corner by scaling it at a quarter size and just basically moving it where I needed it. So I put it down here in the corner as an overlay, and then that's just a simple text or a input overlay done in vMix, and that's it.
Cool. Very good. Next question.
Andrew Myers of Oakville, Canada. Thoughts on having audio mixing for a live stream concert covered in a second hour here on Office Hours?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I will say is, as we're about to shift over to it, and again, if you ask questions for the second hour, in this case, we're talking about the future, make sure to tag them in as second hour, because I'm scanning, it'll show up bold for me in the background. So I'm scanning for how many. So we just ran heavy because I didn't see very many second hour, which we still don't have very many, but I'm just saying that I'm making decisions about how far we run over based on cute questions. I think we should absolutely talk about mixing for concerts. I think that would be I think we've got plenty of people here that have some skill sets in that area, and we could probably bring on a couple people to talk about that. Make sure to put it in the second hour suggestions in Discord, or somebody does that, so that because I'm going to go through a lot of that over the next week or two. Yeah, sounds good. Next question.
And the final one in this set is TJ Asher of Minneapolis saying, what did Tucker mean when he said the person, quote, dried out the line?
Apologies, I went very far technical. It's when you talk about drying out the line, it's removing voltage from it. So if you have a microphone line with phantom power, putting a transformer in line dries it out and takes away that, it isolates the audio signal from the DC voltage that exists on the line. Same thing for comms. That's what we call it. You dry it out.
That's great. So to shift gears for the last 24 minutes or so, one of the things I just wanted to talk about or use this time this week is to talk about things that we'd like to see things people would like to discuss for the second hour for audio. Do panelists have suggestions? And if you have suggestions, go ahead and throw them use the question area in Mukana to throw in recommendations, and we'll get those into the second hour suggestions in Discord. But we want to just brainstorm on the kinds of things that we'd like to see. Anybody have any Leland Best? Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah,
you can. In this case, the panelists, you guys can ask questions. You can just raise your hand rather than put it into the thing. We don't do that, but in this case, we'll have kind of an open conversation among the panelists. But if you're not a panelist, go ahead and use the questions as a place to throw suggestions at us. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, I think overall with the fact that you're discussing audio, voice meter being a virtual mixer and being used a lot in some of these productions that we're doing with vMix as well, is one that I would love to learn more about myself, because as a non-audio proficionado, let's say, there's so much stuff technically advanced on the software that I have no idea how to use. And I would love to know from an audio engineer's perspective what I should be and shouldn't be using, or what I should stick with and stay away from.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Bill?
I just think it'd probably be a great second hour to do basic language around audio, as we just heard with dried out. There's a whole bunch of idioms. There's a whole bunch of technical terms, and even things that we all mostly think are simple, like balanced lines. People still don't understand what that means and how it relates to overall.
And I do think we'll return to some stuff we did over the last year, but with more planning. So meters and balanced audio versus unbalanced, or different line, maybe even just analog lines. We talk about phantom power and balanced and unbalanced, and how we transport those types of things. And I want to get the guys from Audinate in to talk about Dante and like a couple of those types of things to break that up. But I agree with you. Go ahead, Victor.
Two things: deep dives into certain types of plugins, compressors, noise gates, things like this. How do we deeply get into those and use them? Secondly, a complete workflow on post-processing spoken word, from EQing to de-essing to compression to normalization to meeting standards for internet versus film, etc. I think that would be fantastic.
That's great. Sky?
I'm loving all of this. The understanding the nuts and bolts from you people that understand those things. Also, the end audience use, front of house versus flowing to the internet versus flowing to intercoms and things like that. So the different categories of how to mix best for what is the end use of the thing that you're trying to mix.
Right.
So the different categories.
Courtney and Stuart?
I'd like to see a half hour on production sound challenges, specifically for scripted programs. We've had some really good second hour speakers doing, the reality show kind of stuff. But, the challenges that a production sound mixer faces with external sounds and recording the cleanest dialogue tracks without, dealing with too much paraphernalia that would clutter up that track.
Yep. Stuart and then Andy?
I'd love to see a discussion on localized language. There's a lot of terminology that changes with just who you're working for, let alone between regions or between countries. Right. And it'd be great if there was some sort of library that would give us some common reference as to what words are used for different meanings in different areas.
Mm-hmm. Andy?
I think in general, I'd love to see more just a decentralized online production teardowns. And on the audio front, I'd be really interested in tracking the latency and sync through line. I think that's a really tricky one in this medium, and I'd love to see just how people have been in their own builds and setups dealing with that.
Yep, absolutely. Jason, and then Tucker.
I'm thinking that the equivalent of a don't crash course kind of an idea. Wow, my video just got weird. Doesn't matter. So, for example, if you are doing this, here's your pre-flight checklist. Here's what not to do. Instead of giving like, unless this, unless that, and a complicated box and whisker, be like, okay, here's what we know you really shouldn't do. These are your face plants. Check those off first.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back into what we've talked about. Like, people will talk. We can talk all day about a remote guest, but I can just tell you that you need to fix the internet, then fix the audio, then fix the lighting, then fix the camera, then fix the background. Like, that's like these, like if you don't have time, this is the order of importance. But we could talk for hours about all the idiosyncrasies of that. But there are, to your point, don't crash scenarios that will fix most of the things relatively quickly. Go ahead, Tucker.
There's a couple. One of them would be troubleshooting under fire from an audio perspective, because that's one of the big differences between a lot of us is like the ability to see a problem or hear a problem and then immediately have a process in place to just bang, 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 step through it and work through that. I think that's something that every audio has taught me better how to troubleshoot, and it's applied to literally everything else I've done. Just how to methodically work through things. And then the other one was, and it's gone.
Go ahead, Marty.
I'd like to explore more into live remote event mixing. How do you get to log into a mixer remotely? And then how do you get to listen to what you're mixing without the latency of listening to the program feed from Zoom or YouTube?
Yeah.
And that leads me into a second idea, is networking. There's a lot of configuration that can and should be done in data networks and ether networks that we don't generally talk about. Routers and switches and such.
And we did a fair bit of that on Saturdays a couple months ago, but we could definitely bring it back. I mean, it would definitely be something that we could bring back those conversations. We need to make sure that we just have some people here ready to be ready for that. And we had Aaron Mailer, who's kind of my go-to person, but he's been busy. Chris?
Given some of the talent in the group here, I would be very interested in, say, watching Mickey, for example, take a scene and go through every step that he does, how he sources the bits, how, just all the different things, the tools he uses, the plugins he uses, the process that he uses to mix a full scene. And we could do that, with, for example, Jeff could do the same thing with an orchestra. How do you mic it? How do you mix it? How do you make it sound the best? And I think that given, some of the audio capabilities of Zoom, they could patch in, their program out, and we could really hear with a lot of nuance what they're actually doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably somewhere for us to have that thing where someone goes through, you just watch them do what they're doing, and people ask questions while they're doing it. Just a simple scene, whether it's an edit or whether it's audio, whether it's graphics, whether it's, just them building something. They just start building something and talking about it while they're doing it. Go ahead, Alex.
I'd like to have a second hour called "So You Want to Start a Podcast." All you need to know, how you do it for yourself, what equipment you need, and then the actual practicalities, and then maybe another part two, which is how do you continue producing podcasts and how do you keep them going?
Well, I think that you should have those two together, because I always tell people, that's the big thing is don't start the pod. You got to figure out the podcast. I always tell everyone, so that'd be good. Yeah, that's good. Stuart.
Same suggestion as Mr. Fenwick just made, but Mr. Fenwick showing the basics of editing and visual storytelling, like everything from J and L cuts through to how to make sure shots transition smoothly without being jarring to the viewer.
My first guest would be Sky.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's so many people here that we could have people just do something like just take a scene and cut it together, or do the audio, or do whatever, and have us just ask questions, them knowing that they don't have to get from one side to the other. They're just going to start putting it together, and then knowing that they're just going to answer, they're going to stop and answer questions or talk about something, and not have it be something they have to prep a lot for either. They're just like, I'm just going to do something. Maybe we send them something like, try this. What would be kind of fun, I think, would be to, one thought that I've had around things like this, we've done in the Pixel Core in the past, is I'll throw you a bunch of raw assets and tell you to all put it together. Then I take someone, or a lot of times it was me, I would do it live, and people would watch it after they had spent 4 or 5 days pounding against it or talking about it online in the forum. And then they have a whole bunch of questions. Like the thing is, if they have the same assets and then they see someone put it together the way that they would put it together. I mean, and then a lot of times what was interesting was I had people who put it together better than I did. Like, I would put it together, but then they were like, oh, you forgot this, or you could have done this, or you could have done that. And so it was a learning experience for me as well. So it wasn't just me. It was just that I would be the one that was accountable for it. But we could do that with anybody, or a lot of people here, of them doing something. But it's a challenge, and then we do it. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, to Chris's point, the difference between teaching and learning, I mean, we work really hard at getting really fast at something that you don't have to think about it. So to teach something is a different attitude versus getting it done. And see Jeff down there as a teacher, you are trying to drag everybody along with you. If you're an editor on a deadline, you just want to get it done. And so you find those shortcuts. So I like the idea of watching over the shoulder. I've sat on many edit sessions, and better yet, as you say, I've received projects and have to deconstruct them and went, oh, they used that to do this. I would have done it this way. So I'm just saying, both in the good improv concept, both and but help manage the expectation of, is that person a teacher or are they a doer? And often they're different animals.
But I think that I think that in a lot of ways, though, I mean, you're right that you have to do that, but I'm not looking for someone to build an instruction. What I'm looking for what we want to do is take that pressure off. Like we had a green screen event that we brought in Marty Rosenberg. And if you do, again, to go back to IMDb, if you search Martin Rosenberg, you'll see a long list of movies that he worked on. And visual effects DP is what he did a lot of at ILM. Hundreds of of movies, and dating back to like we were going through a hallway we were going through a hallway in San Francisco, and he goes, I recognize this hallway. And he goes, oh, right, this is where we shot the right stuff. like this is what we were shooting, at the time. And so anyway, he couldn't figure it out. It bothered him like half the day. And then he realized, oh, I've been here before. This is where we shot the right stuff. But what he did is we just had him do a green screen shoot. Like he's, visual effects DP. And so we gave him a great dolly and a crew and a thing. And then we had a bunch of people this is back when we did little FM transmitters. There's like 30 people watching with that they could hear him talking. We mic'd him so he didn't have to speak up. And they just watch him do his thing. Like he just did a shoot, and they would listen to him talking to everybody, talking to the actress and talking to the folks. And this is what I want to do. And this is how I want it to go. And then between setups, he would just turn around and they'd all ask questions. And he just go, okay, this is why I did that, and this is what I was thinking. Best class I ever did. Like that we ever executed, and we're in 3210, like we're close to that. And what we're probably going to do next year is try it. Now that will cost money, like for all of you. Like there'll be a sign up that says, hey, for this much money, we're going to bring Marty in and do a green screen shoot. It'll cost you $50 or whatever, because that's going to help pay for I got to rent the stage, right, and hire a crew and do all the things. But the idea is that there's so much you learn that you can't learn unless you just watch someone do it, and it'd be the same thing of having someone like Jeff, sit there and mic an orchestra, and as he's just working on it, and then we can hook him up with a wireless IFB and a mic, and he can just talk about it while he's doing it as if he was talking to students or someone else that he's explaining it to. But getting that kind of seamless, you don't have to be I'm not asking you to build a curriculum. I'm not asking you to plan anything. I just need someone who knows what they're doing to respond to people who are asking questions, and that's the thing that I think would be useful. I mean, that's something where I've been trying to go for 20 years. So we're almost there. We're very close. And I've done little hints of it, but we're closer. TJ and then Bill.
To Sky's point, I think the why or why not is equally as important as the how.
Oh yeah. No, I think the why is sometimes more important, than
I'd say usually more important.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
The thing that swings the widest for me in all the projects I've ever done in my career is where we start, the script. And I'm not sure whether we've done some script breakdown, but we really haven't talked much about how that affects everything after it. I mean, script breakdown is important, but I've gotten so many scripts that are just awful. Usually they come out of corporate where somebody's been trained their whole life to write for the eye, for reading it on a page. They get to having to do a script that writes for the ear, where this is people talking to each other, and they completely fall apart. And once you have a horrible script to start with, it's really hard to come out with a decent program in the end.
And one of the things that I think would be good, we did a voiceover one, you and I and a couple other, and I think Courtney was in it, but we did a couple where we talked about voiceovers. And one thing that what comes up when you talk about that is I'm very good at, I look at someone's script and I can just read it and I can say, oh, you can't have these two consonants together, or you can't have these two vowels together, because you can, but it's really hard. Like someone who's well trained and practiced it a bunch of times can get over that hump, but it may read fine and it may be what you want it to say, but saying that is hard, to do cleanly. And so like talking through what those consonants are and what they look like. And it'd be hard for me to scientifically say that. I can read it and just tell you, oh, that's hard. Let's change this word and put a consonant in because you got two vowels, and it's just hard for me to get to that from one side to the other. And for me, I can do it, but the corporate person you're bringing in is not going to be able to do that well.
And when you get a script from somebody who's good at this, it's just magic. Everything flows. It's easy. Everything's clear about what you should do in terms of breaking it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Chris Fenwick. You had your hand up.
I did have my hand up.
You don't remember what it was?
What I was going to say is the problem with me when it comes to teaching editing, people will go, oh, what was that keyboard shortcut? And I'll go, I don't know. My hand looks like this.
and the thing is that one of the things I want to do is not have, I'm interested in whether it's editing or audio or whatever. I think that there is a conversation talking about the technique of what dials to push and what to do and everything else. But what I'm really interested in is having skilled folks doing things, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Final Cut or Resolve or Premiere or whatever. It doesn't matter what recorders. It's just how they're thinking about it, and talking about like what, how are you thinking about it? It doesn't matter what light you're using, but how big is the light source, and why did you do that? Those will be the kind of things. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, who's your audience and what do you want them to do? That question about story, Bill, yes, it is my core, because I've just watched so many hardware and software just be sold and then disappear. And so again, our core as a human is the story around the campfire 2,000 years ago. So I'd love to hear a lot. That would be my second hour of, we can start getting some writers in here to talk about story. And then as I listened to Tucker, I can't remember the second thing I wanted to say.
But to pull it back into like audio, I think we've got some pretty good senses of like second hours for audio and things to think through there. I think that I want to try to get to at least once a month. It is like a product or a software or something that we bring in and we get to see, like we get to put people, on the hot plate. And then again, for the folks that are working on that day, I mean, I just want to think about a model. Like first Tuesday is this, second Tuesday is this, like we kind of flow through it. It's sometimes easier if we give it that kind of structure to think through it. But experiential ones will probably be something that some of them can be on that second hour, but I think that kind of thing will live on Saturdays a lot, just because they often want to be longer. We proved more than probably anyone else that I've ever seen how quickly you can burn through 3 hours. Like you think that an hour is enough and it never is. So we kind of toast that real quick. Oh, we got a whole bunch of stuff here that I missed.
We got a ton, and I've got a 9:15 hard stop.
All right, let's go through. Let's Leland, we did that one already. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So we're going Greg Kurta from Steiger, Norway. Run over standard effects in depth, EQ, compression, and reverb. That's what he wants to do.
I think that's a whole second hour. Like just that process is definitely a second hour. And this gets back into what does Mickey do, but just talking about what each one of those, how they impact it. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, just call it sweetening.
Yeah, sweetening. Yeah, audio sweetening. Next question or next
Ed
comment.
Willick of Valley Cottage, New York. Gain staging and signal chain from mic to speaker.
Yeah, it's a great subject.
That's a good one.
Really, really good. You know, that's, I mean, just talking about each, we started going through that and we've kind of gotten off the rails, but we started going through it like microphones and sensors and things like that to talk through it. But yeah, I think probably just one whole hour that is like the 10,000 foot view would probably make a lot of sense. Next question or next
James
comment.
Babbitt in San Diego says, could we do some short videos on how to set up your audio? And could you share some of the how to set this up videos you send out with your kits, Alex?
Yes, we can. There's some proprietary stuff in it right now, but let me work on putting together a video that we can actually
Those are
show.
custom builds, though. I mean, how is it really going to help them?
Well, it shows you how we put it together, like what we do. There's, because there are things that we're doing that work, like we color code everything, and there's a PDF, and then there's a video, and the video tells you to turn the yellow knob that we created. So there's a bunch of things there that could be possibly useful for people to know how to do. I will say that PDFs and videos are night and day difference. Like we sent out a PDF, and someone just dash someone across the rocks and very quickly build a video, then everything was fine. So, and you needed both because you needed the step-by-step of the PDF, but you needed the video to show, like trying to explain to someone how to slide a teleprompter onto a tripod. It's a lot of text and 10 seconds of video. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
I think that's a thing on instructions. And I think instructions is an interesting thing. When you send out anything, how do you craft your instructions? Is it just a gray paragraph? Do you use any graphics with it? How do you make it easy?
And this is not a video audio second hour question, but instructional design is something that we're definitely going to talk more about, because just thinking about how do we use all of the mediums that are available to us to teach something is something I'm a little obsessed with. So it's definitely something we'll talk more about because, it's amazing how you miss one of the, most of us produce one piece or another. So when you produce all of them is when it gets really interesting. Go ahead, John Edelson.
I was just going to say instructional design could be months, but yeah, there's an art to making good instruction for tasks.
Yeah. And there's some basics, again, in this last one we did, I had, there was a PDF, there was a video, and then I would get on Zoom and walk through it with you, to put it together. If those ones, so you have kind of multiple layers, and some people didn't need all of them, but some people did. Next comment.
From Greg Yotes in Gridley, Kansas. If you have an interview in a location with constant noise generation, is it possible to mic the noise and subtract it from the talent's microphone input to completely negate the noise?
All right, go ahead, Leland and then Jason.
I'll give my solution to that, and one that's not your standard audio solution, which is the new RTX audio app, which has been found to run not only on RTX video cards, but also on some of the older chipsets as well. That DSP will filter out a ton of background noise for a situation like that, but not the most preferred method.
Go ahead, real quick, Jason, then Mickey, then Stuart.
There is absolutely a way to do this, and it doesn't involve anything digital. This is something that was designed a very, very long time ago that I'm going to let Mickey explain because it's probably going to do a better job than I would.
Mickey?
I don't really know exactly what you're alluding to, Jason, but I would say, without a doubt, the microphone that's on your talent or that is pointed towards your talent will be moving. Don't trust that it will stay in the same place. So even if you do the whole reverse polarity thing, that doesn't guarantee that will always stay in the same phase correlation.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
I was actually going to mention the flipping the audio so it's out of phase in the same way that you have stereo speakers cancel out bass if you hook them up the wrong way.
That's what I was going to mention. That's what I thought Mickey was going to do.
But I have got no idea how to do it in a digital world.
You can definitely identify, there's a lot of tools with almost everything that's built into them, whether it's, I don't know where Logic has it, but it's definitely in a lot of the tools where you just identify a sound print and then you have it go through that and pull that sound print out. It's not perfect, but it definitely can reduce it.
Yeah, but it's not real time. It's not live.
Oh, no. Yeah, I just saw an interview, so I don't know, but this has to be real time. The way to get rid of it real time is with a Cedar box or with a MixPre with NoiseAssist. Go ahead, Jeff.
I will just point out a pet peeve of mine that polarity and phase are two completely different things that are terribly interrelated and very complex, there is an entire second hour right there.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna do that one. Maybe
Might be a
next
really
week.
boring second hour, but you could talk about it for an hour.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We can talk. We have proven you can talk about almost anything.
Yeah, remember who you're talking to, because I think a lot of us would go, "That's really interesting."
John,
we used Levelator in a classroom setting to get noise that was constant out, and Levelator did a very good job. It's post, but it was amazing how well we were able to deal with that. Levelator and a little bit of sweetening, and we got rid of the noise.
That's great. Next comment.
AOIP standards, protocols, products, AES 67 versus Dante versus AVB versus fill in the blank, and how to convert between them. And half of that I didn't understand.
I think
that's a fragment. No.
But I think that would be a great 10,000 foot before we get into AES 67 or Dante or Ravenna or whatever it is. It would be great to have a what do they all mean and everything else. I think you could definitely do it a second hour. I think we'd have to be careful of it not becoming the second, third, and fourth hour to talk through what those are. But I think that would be good for us to figure out a 10,000 foot view of understanding audio over IP. Last comment.
And I believe it is from Aunt Pruitt, who may live in the San Francisco airport. Like most products, there are gimmicks out there that consumers can get sucked into as the best audio option for your new stream. I wonder if there's a bit of advice on what to avoid when budget-minded creators are wanting to get started.
Go ahead, Jason.
Do not use cheap condenser microphones. Understand what causes ground loops, and less is more.
Go ahead, Jeff, and then Mickey.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, I would say think long term. Sound equipment in general lasts a long time. I have microphones that are probably 20 years older than myself. So I would just off the bat save and invest in high quality because they will last your entire career.
Yeah. Stuart?
Don't just think last time about the gear. Think last time about the company that long term about the company that made it. Companies that make gear that is good, even at budget level, they stick around because people are buying the gear over and over again. Look at the length of time the companies existed. If you can do a internet search and you can't find them from 6 months ago, steer clear.
Leland and then Tucker.
Along those lines, don't buy your audio and video equipment from Wish, and also make sure if you are going to buy something online that you compare it selectively to that same process somewhere else. I've found a lot of bogus websites that are showing good AV equipment for sale for incredible prices, and they're just that. They're sucking your money and you will never see the object you ordered. So just make sure you go to a reputable source.
I never saw my Wish order. It's been over a year.
Tucker?
Yeah, look for whenever you see something that says it solves a specific problem, first check and see if it's doing it with DSP. There's almost always an analog way of solving a problem, and find the tool that does it in analog and learn kind of how to do that process. Because while you may find a microphone that's got multiple elements and it uses some DSP to get rid of background noise, the better thing to do is to just go get a couple packing blankets and get a really high quality microphone that has some isolation.
Yep. Jason?
Yeah, avoid superlatives. If it's saying this is going to change everything, be very careful.
One thing I think it's somewhere on YouTube now, but it was in a behind the scenes, is just remember that Dirty Jobs is an SM58 under a blanket in a hotel room. Like almost all the voiceovers, for Dirty Jobs that you hear that's on a relatively large broadcast, probably better than most podcasts, is a very simple mic that's been around for 50 or 60 years that's going into a little recorder. He's literally under a blanket talking to it. Now, is that perfect? Absolutely not. There's a bunch of things that we'll be upset about. You lose the high end, you have to add all the stuff back in. You might have to do some EQ. But the point is that it's like, I think that the first mic that almost anybody should get is always an SM58. Because I used them last week. Like the ones that I bought 20 years ago, I used last week. It's it's indestructible. It's it's not very expensive, and it has especially for podcasting, high off-axis rejection. And so it just means that it's very, you can use it in a lot of locations without it, getting in the way. So anyway, just something to think through. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Mickey.
When Alex says an SM58's indestructible, I've seen them used as hammers.
Yep, I've used them as
kidding.
hammers.
I've used them as hammers.
Yeah, not heavy. I didn't try to do a nail, but I've definitely whacked things in based on that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, everyone should own an SM58 and after that a 416. I would say, just to build on what Tucker was mentioning earlier, work with physics. Like a lot of times, like all these audio issues, be it wireless issues, be it noise issues. If you just think of it as physics problems, that would help a lot.
I mean, I was literally working with some folks that were fairly non-technical last night talking about their audio. And I didn't get into this. I could tell them, okay, get this mic, do this thing, but they already had, they had a Yeti and they had a thing, but I was like, okay, so is there a flat surface right in front of you? Because you just want to think of a flat surface as a mirror, for your audio. So it's going to it's a mirror reflection right back at you. So if you can cover that up or do, and start talking about ways to think about that, and process that is more important. And again, to what Mickey said, the physics are, you get a mic that has a lot of off-axis rejection, you get close to it and it fixes a lot of things really fast. Cover up a couple things with some blankets and you're almost there. Like you can get, for a podcast, these are simple. You can definitely do a lot of other things, but go ahead, Marty. We'll probably close it up.
Yeah, I think tools are one thing. They're fabulous. And having the right tool for the right job is very important. But understanding the fundamentals of audio and acoustics is the most important thing, because when you understand the fundamentals, that helps you to make an informed choice of what tool to use and when.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's and we hope to keep on. I mean, a lot of the commitment that we have here in office hours is that we keep on talking about these things from different angles. And the goal is to generate understanding why we use them and understanding and creating what I would call wisdom in media production. And what's really powerful is that somehow we've been able to attract people that come from every different part of media production so that we're all learning from each other. We're not all audio engineers talking about it, or all video graphics people, or all editors that are talking about the outside world and their world and getting better at that one little thing. We're all getting better at all of those things by having this heterogeneous mix, which is hopefully what we can continue to grow and expand over the next year. Go ahead, Tucker.
Because you're here, pass any of those questions through Discord also, because while you're gaining that knowledge, we're here. Just use us.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, anyway, another good day. We did it again. we thought we were going to run out of questions and then we ran heavy. That's what we do. So anyway, great conversation, everyone. And again, at the end of the year, I'm now talking. I used to say next week, and then I said next month, and now I'm like, what are we going to do over the next year? So I think that I'm pretty addicted to the process. So anyway, great seeing you all as always, and I think we'll probably do this tomorrow. At least one more. So tomorrow we'll talk about
probably.
Yeah. Tomorrow we'll talk about video. So think about things that you'd like to see next year in video production, and the kind of things you'd like to see in second hours. And if you put those in early and tag them as second hour, we'll go to that conversation faster. But if we don't see a lot of tags for the second hour, we'll run a little heavy this week. I'm going to try to go back to more structure next week, but this week we're going to kind of let those questions keep rolling if we're not being pushed out the door. So anyway, I'll open up the post here in just a second. I guess I don't have to. I've got this down now. I guess I disappear, right? I disappear, and then a couple seconds later the thing ends. Is that how this? Because I get two things that I have to hit to